Well, welcome to your first unit test review podcast. I wish we had time for in-class test review, but we don't. So I am bribing students into watching these review lectures by giving away a lot of the answers. You already have a great deal on your plate, but I still think it's worth watching the introduction to the AP test lecture up on Moodle. It goes over actual College Board questions on some of the works you saw over the summer and in our Judith and Holofernes introduction. One of these questions will be on the test, although frankly it's an easy one. But the main reason for watching the AP test review podcast is to begin getting a feel for how to tackle AP questions. Test-taking strategies will not replace studying, but they help. So, what's on this unit test? First, you will get many of the matching questions that are already up on Moodle. No dates, you'll be happy to hear. The toughest questions are probably places. Hint, hint. You will have 30 multiple choice questions in addition to these matching questions. Most are from the College Board, some are from other sources. Many of the questions already show up in your review quiz, since these questions are all up on Moodle for unlimited attempts, and with explanations, you'll know the right answer and why the question writer thought these were the right answers. It is worth reading these explanations so that you start to understand the logic of the course. As on the actual AP exam, some of these questions will include one or more images, and others will assume that you remember what the image looks like. So here's the start of your long essay question. I expect this to take you about 15 to 20 minutes to write. You may bring in handwritten notes this early in the course. Later we get tougher on you. But you may not bring in a completed essay, and you may not use your workbooks on the test. So here's the full question. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Give a full identification for the work you've chosen. Date, culture, materials, and/or technique, as well as title. Explain where it's located or where it was found. And again, not only the geographical location, but the kind of site. So if it was found in a garbage dump in Draper, you should have that information. And then discuss what this location might suggest about the function or use of that work. You found an empty Coke can in a garbage dump in Draper? That suggests ritual libations, a drinking ceremony, right? Notice the word suggest. We can't know for sure. If you end up writing an essay on a prehistoric work on the actual AP exam, and I suspect you won't, I recommend that you make this very clear. And this brings me to the last part of the question. Discuss one possible explanation for the work's meaning or significance to its culture, and then support this explanation with specific evidence. This can be evidence from the work itself or from similar works. By the way, I strongly recommend finding at least 2 pieces of evidence. On the AP exam, one good piece of evidence and one good answer to the question will get you full points, but if they don't like those answers, then you won't get the point. In my experience, students tend to write too little on the AP exam. One peculiarity of the AP exam is that you don't get marked down for incorrect information, but you do get marked down for missing information. So more is better. And feel free to do some more research on the work that you choose. The AP exam is going to ask you to apply the knowledge you've gained from required works to similar works that you've not seen. You'll see some examples of this in the multiple choice questions as well, especially some of those review quiz questions. We are going to give you a rock art image that was not assigned, and it's not up on this slide, although it's somewhat similar to what you see on this slide. You will need to identify 2 features of this unknown work that are similar to those you've seen in one of 3 rock art works we have studied, the Apollo 11 stone, the paintings in the Lascaux Cave, and the Running Horn Women. Remember, if it's not rock art, it's not going to be a good choice for comparison. And this isn't really an essay. We just want a few clear sentences naming the feature and explaining how it shows up in the work I show you and one of your required works. I don't think you'll find this hard, but you should review rock art. Here again, this is not the image you're going to get on the test. This sleeping antelope was carved into a rock in Algeria. The animal that appears on your test was carved into a rock in France. But if you can figure out the answer for this image, you'll get the other one right as well. You should have the name for this kind of perspective in your notes, and you should be able to find the work that also employs this perspective. So some form of this question shows up in all of my sources. Prehistoric artists did not care about giving us a ground line or showing us where these figures were oriented in space. Did I just give you a characteristic of prehistoric rock art? I think maybe I did. Multiple artists added figures over long periods of time, sometimes on top of each other. So we can't really draw conclusions about the intended composition of these works from the jumble of figures. So why were the rocks at Stonehenge probably arranged the way they were? This photo, which will not appear on the test, gives you a very broad hint. But you have to know when this happened, what time of year. Just knowing that this photo shows a sunrise will not be enough to answer the question correctly. Okay, the image does not accompany this question on the test. I'm just helping you out. In fact, I'm going to give you the answer because this is one of the College Board questions that I find puzzling. I even complained about it on the teacher discussion board, but it showed up again on AP Classroom, so you need to know the answer. Scholars think that the shape of the Kong, a square with a circular hole, may symbolize the earth, which has four corners, and the sky, which is viewed as round. The carved face, likewise, has an iconography similar to later Chinese works, and that's the right answer, the shape and iconography. The problem is, I think some of the other answers also make sense. The Kong was made of a highly valued, although not especially scarce stone, jade. It was hard to work. Remember, those Neolithic people had to use other stones for carving. Mostly in this case, they used sand, which is just tiny stones, to abrade the jade to create designs. Think of how much work that must have been. The Kong, likewise, seems highly stylized, at least to me. The College Board uses the term reductive simplicity, which really means stylized. Now, stylized is not necessarily synonymous with being an object of ritual, but many objects of ritual are, in fact, stylized. And finally, while the Kong was not a large item, it was fairly large for a jade carving from a single piece of jade. The most obvious answer to me isn't one of the choices. The jade Kong was found at a burial site with other rare and costly items, which to me suggests association with burial rituals. But maybe that's just too logical. So I told you that you were most likely to be asked a question about this work that referred to its status as... You could take it from there. You should have the answer in your notes. This is an easy and obvious question, but there are some harder questions about this work in your review quizzes. You should also think about how the animal is depicted or portrayed to help you in the short essay question as well as some of the multiple choice questions. Okay, here's another question I complained about on the discussion board and another question in the resurface on AP Classroom. So let's think it through. What is the content of this work? It's actually a hard question, especially since this is a prehistoric work and we don't really know what the two-faced figure represents. Is it a representation of duality? It seems logical since this fits with other later Mesoamerican work. Yet it's a figurine, like the Ambum stone, and it has a weird face, like the Lapita carving. The College Board says the answer is the Jade Kong, and they're in charge. It's true that both the Jade Kong and the Tlatelolco figurines seem to have a kind of human face, or maybe a human monster face, and both works may suggest a duality, such as the duality between earth and the heavens. But the Lapita fragment has a stylized face too, and the Ambum stone is also a figurine. So I do find this a confusing question, but I just gave you the correct answer. So you may be asking yourself, why did she put a question on the test that she thinks is confusing? And the answer is that I want you to get used to College Board questions. You will see other questions that we teachers sometimes find confusing. You may even encounter them on the test itself. Mind to the folks who write these exams, even if it sometimes makes our head hurt. So, what's the latest theory about what these paintings are for? We talked about this in class. Think about black elk. You should remember some other theories, too. We also talked about this in class, and it was on one of your quizzes. So, the answer and the key art vocabulary word for Italian Baroque painting is included in the introduction to the AP exam podcast. Consider this a bribe to watch that video, but we also talked about it in class. So, this is an easy question if you remember or look up where this was found. Warning, on the test you do not get the name of the work. You do get the name of the work, but you don't get the image. This is a classic example of a question where you'll need some visual recall of the work. If you remember what it looks like, the answer will be easy. The AP exam used to include a series of questions about a pair of images. Some will ask about the works individually, some will compare them. There are fewer questions in this format, and you may not see any, but I've included a few about these two works. Both works are stylized. You need to know what that term means. Remember the political party, elephant and donkey? For the image on the left, you need to know what anthropomorphized means. For the image on the right, you need to know what kind of tools the artist used. What does the lith in Paleolithic and Neolithic mean? Also, what is the figure thought to represent? Remember, as always, that with prehistoric works, this is just a theory. Good luck on the test, but if you've made it this far, you probably don't need luck.